person on earth will be forced to make a life or death decision about their eternal destiny. Welcome back to Sermon Pod Ministries. I'm Tom, and with me as always is my amazing co-host Sarah. Today, we're diving into Revelation chapter 13, where we encounter two beasts, a mysterious mark, and prophecies that have captivated readers for centuries. Sarah, would you please outline the pivotal events in this fascinating chapter?
Thank you, Tom. Revelation 13 is a crucial chapter in the final book of the Bible, presenting two distinct beasts that will play significant roles during the tribulation period. In the first half of the chapter, verses 1 to 10 describe a beast rising from the sea with 7 heads and 10 horns, symbolizing a powerful political leader. The second half, verses 11 to 18, introduces another beast emerging from the earth, who enforces worship of the first beast and implements the infamous Mark of the Beast. This chapter essentially unveils Satan's final attempt to counterfeit God's authority through a false trinity.
Let's begin with the first beast described in Revelation 13 verses 1 to 2, where John sees this terrifying creature rising from the sea. Sarah, could you explain the symbolism behind this beast's appearance and what the various features, 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns, represent?
The beast's appearance in Revelation 13 verses 1 to 2 is rich with symbolism, Tom. The sea often represents the masses of humanity in prophetic literature, suggesting this beast emerges from the chaos of nations. The 7 heads likely represent 7 kingdoms or empires, while the 10 horns symbolize 10 kings or nations that will give their power to the beast. Interestingly, this description parallels Daniel's vision in Daniel 7, where 4 beasts represent 4 kingdoms. This beast combines characteristics of all 4 of Daniel's beasts, suggesting it's the culmination of all earthly empires opposing God.
That's fascinating, Sarah. In Revelation 13 verses 3 to 4, we see something extraordinary. One of the beast's heads appears to suffer a fatal wound but is miraculously healed. This leads to worldwide amazement and worship. What's your interpretation of this event, Sarah? And how does it relate to Satan's strategy?
This apparent resurrection in Revelation 13 verses 3 to 4 is Satan's attempt to counterfeit Christ's death and resurrection, Tom. The text tells us that the whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. This miraculous healing becomes a pivotal moment that convinces many to worship both the dragon, Satan, and the beast. It's worth noting that the Greek word for fatal wound is the same word used to describe Christ's death, suggesting this is a deliberate mimicry of Christ's resurrection, designed to deceive people into following this false Messiah.
Moving to Revelation 13 verses 5 to 8, we see the beast being given authority to exercise power for 42 months. Sarah, could you break down the significance of this time frame and explain what the beast does during this period?
The 42-month period mentioned in Revelation 13 verses 5 to 8 corresponds to 3.5 years, which is the second half of the 7-year tribulation period. During this time, the beast speaks blasphemies against God and is given authority to wage war against God's people. The text specifically states that he's given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. This represents a period of unprecedented global control and persecution of believers. It's crucial to note that only those whose names are not written in the Lamb's Book of Life will worship the beast.
In Revelation 13 verse 10, we find an interesting statement about the perseverance of God's people. Sarah, how should believers interpret this verse, especially in light of the intense persecution described?
Revelation 13 verse 10 is both a warning and an encouragement, Tom. The verse states, "If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed." This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. It reminds believers that while persecution may come, God remains sovereign. The verse echoes Jesus' words in Matthew 26 verse 52 about those who live by the sword dying by the sword, emphasizing that God's people are called to faithful endurance rather than violent resistance.
Let's transition to the second beast introduced in Revelation 13 verse 11, often called the false prophet. Sarah, what's significant about this beast coming from the earth rather than the sea? And what do his lamb-like horns but dragon-like speech suggest?
The second beast's emergence from the earth in Revelation 13 verse 11 contrasts with the first beast's origin from the sea, possibly indicating a more localized or religious authority rather than a political one. The lamb-like horns suggest a deceptive appearance of gentleness and possibly a counterfeit of Christ, who is called the Lamb of God. However, his dragon-like speech reveals his true nature. He speaks with Satan's authority. This beast represents a religious leader who appears benign but promotes Satan's agenda, completing the unholy trinity of Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet.
In Revelation 13 verses 13 to 14, we see this second beast performing miraculous signs, including calling fire from heaven. Sarah, how do these signs relate to biblical warnings about deception in the end times?
These miraculous signs in Revelation 13 verses 13 to 14 directly fulfill Jesus' warning in Matthew 24 verse 24 about false prophets performing great signs and wonders to deceive even the elect if that were possible. The ability to call fire from heaven specifically mimics the prophet Elijah's authentic miracle in 1 Kings 18. This shows how Satan uses counterfeit miracles to validate false religious authority. The second beast's ability to perform these signs leads people to create an image of the first beast, establishing a false worship system that combines religious and political authority.
One of the most chilling aspects appears in Revelation 13 verse 15, where the image of the beast is given breath and can speak, even causing those who refuse to worship it to be killed. Sarah, how should we understand this supernatural aspect of the image?
The animated image described in Revelation 13 verse 15 represents a culmination of deceptive power. Whether this is a literal statue given life or involves advanced technology, the key point is its ability to enforce worship through fear and death. This parallels Nebuchadnezzar's golden image in Daniel 3, but with an added supernatural element. The image becomes an instrument of both religious control and elimination of dissent, forcing people to choose between worshiping the beast or facing execution.
Now we come to perhaps the most famous aspect of this chapter, the mark of the beast. In Revelation 13 verses 16 to 17, we read about this mark being required for all economic transactions. Sarah, could you explain the significance of this mark and its placement on the right hand or forehead?
The mark described in Revelation 13 verses 16 to 17 represents complete allegiance to the beast system. The placement on the right hand or forehead is significant because it contrasts with God's command in Deuteronomy 6 verses 6 to 8, where his words were to be bound on the hand and forehead. This mark becomes a twisted counterfeit of God's seal on his people. Without this mark, people cannot buy or sell, making it impossible to participate in society. This creates an unprecedented level of economic control that forces people to choose between physical survival and spiritual loyalty to God.
In Revelation 13 verse 18, we encounter the famous number 666 described as the number of the beast. Sarah, what insights can you share about this mysterious number and its significance?
The number 666 in Revelation 13 verse 18 is described as the number of a man. In biblical numerology, 7 represents perfection, while 6 falls short of perfection. The triple repetition of 666, emphasizes the ultimate human failure to achieve divine perfection. It's worth noting that in ancient times, letters also represented numbers, leading many scholars to suggest this number might also represent a name. However, the key point isn't solving a mathematical puzzle, but recognizing this as a symbol of human pride and rebellion against God, falling short of his perfect standard.
Let's explore the psychological impact of these events. Sarah, how do you think this combination of religious deception, economic control, and threat of death affects people's decision-making process during this period?
Looking at Revelation 13 verses 12 to 17, we see a carefully orchestrated system of coercion that targets people's deepest vulnerabilities. The combination of miraculous signs, economic pressure, and death threats creates overwhelming pressure to conform. This mirrors historical periods of persecution, but on an unprecedented global scale. The text suggests that people will face immense pressure to rationalize accepting the mark, perhaps viewing it as mere economic necessity rather than the spiritual declaration of allegiance it represents.
The technology aspect of this chapter fascinates many readers. Sarah, how should we view modern technological advances in light of these prophecies, particularly regarding global economic control and identification systems?
While Revelation 13 verses 16 to 17 doesn't specifically mention technology, modern developments certainly show how such a system could be implemented. However, we should be careful not to focus solely on the technological aspects and miss the spiritual significance. The core issue isn't the method of implementation, but the choice it represents: allegiance to God or submission to the beast's system. Whether through advanced technology or simpler means, the mark represents a conscious rejection of God in favor of the beast's authority.
Sarah, many of our listeners might be wondering about the timing of these events. How does this chapter fit into the broader timeline of end-time prophecies?
The events of Revelation 13 occur during the Great Tribulation, specifically the second half of the 7-year tribulation period mentioned in Daniel 9 verse 27. This aligns with Jesus' warnings in Matthew 24 about the Great Tribulation and the Apostle Paul's descriptions in 2 Thessalonians 2 about the man of lawlessness. The 42-month period mentioned in